The forensic lab smelled the same way it always did. Antiseptic and old paper. With something underneath that I'd stopped noticing after my 3rd year on the job. I was elbow deep in a cold case file when my phone buzzed across the steel table. I didn't look up. When you're cataloging bone fragments from a 1987 Jane Doe, you don't stop for a text, but it buzzed again and again. I peeled off one glove and reached for it. I need to see you. Tonight. Ethan, I hadn't spoken to my brother in 4 months. I set the phone face down and went back to work. Whatever it was, it could wait until I'd finished labeling the evidence bags. I was meticulous like that. My colleagues called it a gift. My ex-boyfriend called it a problem. I called it the only way I knew how to function. By the time I locked up the lab and stepped out into the October cold of downtown Vancouver, Ethan had sent 6 more messages. I read them in the elevator of the parkade. They were short, fragmented, not like him. He was the wordy one, the one who wrote 3 paragraphs when a single sentence would do. It's important. Please. It's about the gala. Margot's will be there. I need someone I can trust. Just come to the restaurant. Please, Anna. Margot's. The name landed in my chest like a stone dropped in still water. I drove to the restaurant. Ethan was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table at Hawksworth, with a glass of red wine he hadn't touched. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days, which, knowing him, probably meant he hadn't slept in 4. He stood when he saw me and pulled me into a hug that lasted a few seconds longer than normal. You look terrible, I said. Thanks. Sit down. He was 34, 4 years older than me, and he'd always been the composed one. The one who held things together when our mother got sick. The one who quietly managed everything after our father left. The one who built something real from nothing. He'd started his company when he was 27. Private security consulting. The kind that governments hired when they didn't want to involve governments. I didn't ask many questions. He didn't offer many answers. It worked for us. But tonight he looked like someone who had run out of answers. Tell me what's going on, I said. He poured me a glass from the bottle and waited until the server had moved away. You know the Vancouver Resource Summit, he said. The one at the Fairmont next Friday. I knew of it. It was a formal charity gala attached to a major international mining and resources conference. The kind of event that drew federal ministers, CEOs of companies worth more than some countries, and the sort of people whose names appeared in business sections, but never on social media. My brother's company handled part of the security contract. I need you to come with me, he said. As my date, I stared at him. You have a date. You've been with Caroline for 2 years. Something crossed his face. Quick, controlled, gone. Caroline won't be there. Why not? Because I ended things with her last month. I hadn't known that. I felt a flicker of guilt. We'd been out of touch longer than I'd realized. I'm sorry, I said. But Ethan, I know what I'm asking. He leaned forward. There's a man who'll be at this gala. His name is Nikolai Voss. He's the one who's been funneling dirty money through 3 of our client contracts. We've been building a case against him for 8 months. The RCMP has a parallel investigation. But we need someone inside that room who isn't a known face. Someone he hasn't run background on already. The wine glass in my hand felt suddenly heavier. Ethan, you're a forensic consultant. You hold federal security clearance. You're my sister, so your being there is completely natural. No one will think twice about it. He said it carefully, like he'd rehearsed it. Maybe he had. You don't have to do anything except be there. Talk to people. Be yourself. And Margot? He looked down at the table. She's going to be there with him. With Voss. My stomach dropped. Margot Belleville had been my closest friend from undergrad, and then from the 4 years we'd shared an apartment in Kitsilano while I finished my master's, and she built her import consulting business from the ground up. She was sharp, funny, fiercely loyal, and absolutely reckless when it came to men. She always had been, even at 22. The last time I'd seen her was 14 months ago, at a rooftop party in Yaletown. She'd mentioned a new man. Older. Serious money. She'd looked happy in the way people look when they don't quite believe it yet. I hadn't known his name until now. She doesn't know who he is, I said. It wasn't a question. Ethan shook his head. We don't think so, but we can't be sure. And if she's close to him, if she's been exposed to anything, he stopped. I thought you should know, before you decided. I looked at my brother across the table, at the careful way he was holding his face still, at the wine he still hadn't touched. "When do I need to decide?" I asked. "Now," he said quietly. "I need to know tonight." I said yes. Obviously I said yes. I told myself it was because of Margot's. Because she deserved to know who she was tangled up with, and because if there was even a chance she was in over her head, I wasn't the kind of person who looked the other way. But if I'm honest, and I've spent enough time with dead people to know the value of honesty, part of it was something else entirely, something I wasn't ready to name yet. I spent the next 4 days at work and then at my kitchen table, reading everything I could find about the Gala's attendee list. My cat, Biscuit, sat on the corner of the table and watched me with the resigned look she'd perfected over 6 years of cohabitation. She'd been fed. She had water. She did not understand why I was not in bed at midnight, and she made this known through proximity and occasional low-grade complaint. "I know," I told her. She blinked slowly. On Thursday evening, my brother's assistant, a very efficient woman named Helena, who communicated exclusively through tightly worded emails, sent me a schedule, a dress code, and a briefing document with a photograph attached. I opened the photograph. Nikolai Voss was in his early 40s, dark-haired, with the kind of build that suggested he had never once in his life been comfortable being told what to do. He was photographed at some European event, in a charcoal suit, speaking to someone off-frame. He wasn't looking at the camera. People like him usually weren't. There was a second photograph, candid, taken at a distance. Him and Margot's at what looked like a restaurant in Montreal. She was laughing. He was not, but he was watching her laugh with an expression I couldn't quite categorize. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I lay awake for 2 hours. The Fairmont Ballroom on a Friday night in October was the kind of room that cost money just to look at. High ceilings, chandeliers that caught the light and threw it back in 100 directions, and the low, dense hum of people performing their best versions of themselves. I arrived with Ethan at 7, in a navy gown I'd borrowed from a colleague who was exactly my size and had significantly better taste. I had barely made it through the champagne reception before I saw her. Margot's was wearing deep burgundy, her dark hair pinned back, and she was on Nikolai Voss's arm. She looked well. She looked at ease. She was talking to a woman in a green dress, gesturing with her champagne flute, laughing at something. The ease of someone who belonged somewhere. Then she turned and saw me. For a half second, just half a second, something flashed across her face. Surprise, and then something more complicated. Then she smiled, and it was warm, and she crossed the room toward me with her arms slightly open. "Anna?" she said. "What are you doing here?" "My brother's company is on the security contract." I hugged her. She smelled like the same perfume she'd always worn. "You look amazing." "So do you." She held me at arm's length and looked me over with the particular attention of someone who has known you long enough to notice the things you're not saying. "You didn't tell me you'd be here. I didn't know until this week." "Technically true." She glanced over her shoulder. Voss had moved to a group of men near the bar but was watching us. Not staring, just aware. The way people are when they've trained themselves never to fully stop paying attention. "Come meet him," Margot said. I did not want to meet him. But I followed her anyway, because the alternative was explaining why I wouldn't, and I had no explanation that wouldn't require a conversation I wasn't authorized to have. Up close, Nikolai Voss was, and I say this with the deep reluctance of someone who really wished otherwise. Even harder to dismiss. He was taller than he'd appeared in the photographs. He had the kind of stillness that's distinct from passivity. It was control, deliberate and total. The stillness of someone who had decided long ago that motion was something you chose, not something that happened to you. "Nikolai," Margot said, "this is my oldest friend, Anna. Anna Reyes. She's a forensic consultant with the BC Coroner's Service." He extended his hand, and his handshake was firm without being performative. "What kind of forensic work?" he asked. People never asked that. They usually said something like, "Oh, how interesting," and then changed the subject. Skeletal trauma analysis, mostly. Cold cases, identifying cause and manner of death from physical evidence when the body's been there a while. A pause. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "That sounds like patient work." "It is," I said. "Most people aren't good at patient work. No, I agreed. They aren't. Margot looked between us with a faintly amused expression, the look of someone watching a tennis rally they hadn't anticipated. Then someone pulled her into a conversation about a property development project, and I was left standing next to Nikolai Voss with a champagne flute and nowhere to look. How long have you known her? He asked. Since we were 19. She corrected my French in a first-year lecture, and then bought me coffee to apologize for it. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Close enough. She talks about you, he said. You're the grounded one. That's a diplomatic word for boring. That's not what I said. I looked at him directly. He was already looking at me. Not the way men usually do at galas, assessing, comparative, half distracted by the room. He was simply looking, the way I looked at an evidence file, trying to understand what was actually there. It made me deeply uneasy in a way I couldn't account for. I excused myself to find my brother. Ethan was near the east corridor, speaking in low tones with a man I didn't recognize who had the general bearing of someone from a federal agency. They stopped when I approached. He knows who I am, I said quietly. He knows who everyone is, Ethan said. That's the point. He knows you're my sister, and he knows you work for the coroner's service. That's your full legend, and it's all real, so don't worry about it. He asked follow-up questions. My brother studied me for a moment. What kind of follow-up questions? Intelligent ones. A pause. Stay close to Margot. If she says anything about his business, travel patterns, contacts, anything that feels off, note it. But don't push. And Anna. He touched my elbow briefly. Don't let him engage you. These people are very good at making you feel like you're the one doing the engaging. I went back to the ballroom. The dinner was 8 courses in 3 hours, which is a particular kind of endurance test in formal wear. I was seated 3 tables from Voss, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid another conversation I wasn't sure I could navigate. I talked to a deputy minister about cold case funding. I talked to a woman who ran a family-owned mining operation in northern BC about what it was like to transition their extraction permits post-2020. Ordinary conversations. Real ones. The kind I was actually good at. Halfway through the 5th course, Margot slipped into the empty seat beside me. He likes you, she said without preamble. He doesn't know me. That's not how he works. She picked up my untouched bread roll and tore a piece off. He's been watching you for the last 40 minutes. I kept my expression neutral. I think you might be projecting. She laughed, soft and private. The laugh I'd heard in her kitchen at 2 a.m. 100 times. Anna, I've known you since you were 19 and terrible at French. You're nervous about something. What's going on? The thing about old friends is that they know where to press. The thing about forensic work is that it teaches you how to hold your face still when someone presses. I'm fine, I said. Tell me about him. You never really told me about him. Her expression shifted, warmth and something guarded, all at once. He's complicated, she said. He keeps things close. But he's never been anything other than honest with me, she paused. That sounds like a small thing. It isn't. No, I said. It isn't. The 5th course was cleared. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror for 2 minutes breathing carefully. Then I went back out. The trouble started at the end of the evening. I'd stepped out onto the terrace for air, the kind of cold, clean October air that Vancouver does better than anywhere. Salt off Burrard Inlet, the lights of the North Shore reflected in the water. I had my phone out, and I was noting down a name Margot had mentioned. A contact in Zurich, someone her partner had introduced her to recently, someone who'd offered to help restructure a portion of her import business. I didn't hear him until he was beside me. You're writing something, Voss said. I pocketed my phone. I turned around. He was standing at a comfortable distance, jacket still perfect, looking out at the water rather than at me. 2 people theoretically, just stepping out for air. Notes, I said. Professional habit. What kind of notes? I looked at the side of his face, the kind I keep to myself. He was quiet for a moment. The water moved below us. Somewhere inside, the last of the speeches were winding down. Your brother's company runs a portion of this event's security, he said. It was not phrased as a question. Yes. And you came tonight as his guest. Yes. That's interesting. My pulse was entirely too steady. That was also interesting in its own way. Why? Because you're very good at listening and very careful about what you say. That combination is unusual at events like this. Most people here are trying to be heard. He finally turned to look at me. You're trying to understand. The thing is, I almost said something. I came very close to it. Not to revealing anything, but to acknowledging what was actually happening in the space between us, which was something I couldn't afford to acknowledge at all. I'm a forensic consultant, I said instead. Understanding things from insufficient evidence is literally my job. He looked back at the water. And what have you understood tonight about this room? About the people in it. That everyone here is performing something, I said. And most of them have been doing it long enough that they've forgotten what's underneath. A pause. And me? I haven't decided yet. He looked at me then. Really looked the kind that you feel somewhere below the sternum. And for a moment, I thought he was going to say something I wasn't ready to hear. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and produced a card. He held it out without ceremony. My office number, he said, in case you reach a conclusion. Then he went back inside. I stood on the terrace for another 3 minutes. The inlet was very dark and very quiet. Burrard Inlet does not smell like salt water. It smells like cold and rain and distance. I noted that detail because I am constitutionally incapable of letting factual inaccuracies go uncorrected, even in my own thoughts. Then I took out my phone and finished my notes. My brother called me at 8 the next morning. We have a problem, he said. The contact in Zurich that Margot had mentioned, the one she'd been introduced to through Voss, wasn't just a financial restructuring contact. He was a known intermediary. His name had appeared twice in the RCMP's parallel investigation, attached to 2 numbered accounts in different jurisdictions. If Margot had signed anything, if she'd transferred anything, even unknowingly, she needs to talk to someone, Ethan said. Today. And it can't come from us directly. It needs to come from someone she trusts. You want me to tell her. I want you to be there when she's told. There's a difference. There was not, I thought, very much difference. I called Margot. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was already awake and somewhere with coffee, the way she always was on Saturday mornings. I told her I wanted to get breakfast. She said yes immediately, and I wondered, not for the first time, what it would feel like to be the kind of person who accepted invitations without wondering what was underneath them. We met at a cafe on Commercial Drive, small and warm, with mismatched chairs and the particular kind of comfortable noise that makes difficult conversations slightly more bearable. I sat across from her with both hands around my coffee, and I told her everything I was authorized to tell her. She didn't cry. That surprised me and didn't surprise me at all. Margot processed things inward, always had, and then, much later, she would allow herself to feel it. Right now she was in the first stage. Very still, very quiet, looking at the table. The Zurich contact, she said finally. Yes, I signed a restructuring agreement 2 weeks ago. She looked up. I didn't ask enough questions. She said it flatly, without self-pity, which made it worse. I trusted his judgment, and I didn't ask enough questions. You didn't know. I should have known more. She picked up her cup and set it down without drinking. Is Nikolai being investigated for the restructuring specifically, or for something else? I can't tell you more than I have. She nodded slowly. Okay. A beat. Okay. We sat there for a while. The cafe noise continued around us. Espresso machines, a child somewhere near the window, someone's phone playing music quietly. The ordinary Saturday morning of a city that did not know or care what was happening at our table. What do I do? She asked. You call the number I'm about to give you, I said. And you tell them exactly what you told me. Everything. Including what you knew and what you didn't. I paused. They'll be fair. I know the person running this. She's fair. Margot looked at me for a long moment. You've been doing this your whole life, haven't you? Putting the pieces together and then figuring out what to do with them. It's just work, I said. No, she said. It isn't. I didn't think about Nikolai Voss for the rest of the weekend. I was very deliberate about it. I worked on a case file. I reorganized the shelf above my desk that had been bothering me for 3 months. I took Biscuit to the vet for her annual checkup, where she behaved with the dignity of a much larger animal and was given a clean bill of health. I returned a library book. I made soup. I did not look at the card he'd given me. On Sunday evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered it because I always answer unknown numbers. Occupational habit. "Mrs. Reyes," said a voice I recognized. "This is Nikolai Voss." I sat down on the kitchen stool. Biscuit looked up from the floor. "How did you get this number?" I asked. "Your brother's company," he said. "Before you're alarmed, I called your brother directly. He knows I'm calling. I made a note to have a word with my brother." "What do you want?" A pause. Not an awkward one, a considered one, the kind that belonged to someone who had trained themselves to speak precisely. "I want to know what you told Margot yesterday morning." "I can't discuss that. I know. I'm not asking you to." Another pause. "I'm asking because I care about what happens to her. Whatever you may think that's worth." I thought about Margot at the cafe. Her hands still around her cup, her voice flat with the effort of holding herself together. I thought about the photograph of them in Montreal, the way he'd been watching her laugh. "I think," I said carefully, "that you should probably get a lawyer. A very good one. I already have several." Something in his voice shifted, not warmer, exactly, but less guarded. "I meant what I said on the terrace. You're unusually good at reading things." "What you said on the terrace was that I understood people." "Yes. And what is it you want me to understand right now?" The pause this time was longer. "That not everything is what the evidence suggests," he said, "and that I'm aware of how that sounds. And I'm not asking you to believe it, only to hold space for the possibility." I looked at Biscuit. She looked back at me with the absolute unimpressed patience of an animal who has witnessed me make every mistake I have ever made and has chosen to remain anyway. "I'll think about it," I said. I hung up. The next 3 weeks moved the way investigations always do, in fragments and then all at once. Margot's cooperation with the RCMP established a clear documentary trail that supported what Ethan's team had already built. 2 of the intermediary accounts were frozen. The Zurich contact was taken in for questioning. The case, as my brother put it in a phone call I overheard him making through the wall of our mother's kitchen at Thanksgiving, was moving faster than expected in all the right directions. Margot came for Thanksgiving dinner. She looked tired but steadier, the steadiness of someone who had made a difficult decision and was living with it. She helped our mother with the sweet potatoes, and argued with Ethan about hockey, which is something she'd been doing since the first time she'd come home with me from university, and discovered that our family's relationship with the Canucks was, in her words, deeply unhinged. "Some things don't change." After dinner, in the kitchen, she said, "He reached out to me. I was drying a pot. And I didn't respond. She handed me another dish. I think that's the right thing. I'm not sure about all of it yet, what he knew and what he didn't. What he chose." She paused. "But you believed him, didn't you? That night on the phone." I set the pot down. "What makes you say that?" "Because you told him to get a lawyer instead of hanging up on him immediately. And with you, those are very different things." I laughed despite myself. The particular laugh that only certain people can draw out of me. The helpless one. The honest one. "I believe that he meant what he said," I told her. "I don't know yet if what he said was true." "That's very forensic of you," she said. "Thank you," I said. "I've been told it's a problem." In December, I got an email. It was brief, came from an address I didn't recognize, and contained a single attachment. A photograph. Not candid. Taken deliberately. It was a picture of my lab, from the street level, through the window. My desk, my equipment, the shelf I'd reorganized, Biscuit's water bowl that I kept there on the days I brought her in. A photograph of my ordinary life, taken from the outside. Underneath it was a line of text. I kept my word. I cooperated fully. Everything I told you on the terrace was true. The photograph is not a threat. It's an acknowledgement. Someone was watching before you came to the gala. Not me. I want you to know that. And I want you to know that they won't be watching anymore. NV. I forwarded it to my brother within 30 seconds of reading it. He called me back in 2 minutes flat. "Where did this come from?" "I don't know. That's why I'm sending it to you. Anna." His voice was tighter than I'd heard it in a while. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "But I think someone should look into who was outside my window." They looked into it. It took 11 days. The trail led back to a third party. Someone connected to the Zurich intermediary. Someone who had been watching people adjacent to the investigation in the weeks before the gala. Not Voss, not his operation. Someone who'd been trying to understand how much the investigation had already built. My brother called to tell me when it was confirmed. He told the truth, I said. A pause. Yeah, Ethan said. He did. I sat with that for a moment, then I went to my desk, opened the second drawer, and took out the card I had not thrown away. I called the number on a Wednesday evening in January. Vancouver in January is the kind of dark and wet that feels like the city has decided to be honest with you. And I was sitting at my kitchen table with tea, I wasn't drinking, and Biscuit on the chair across from me, doing what she did, which was exist with total conviction. He picked up after 2 rings. I've reached a conclusion, I said. I know, he said. You don't know what it is yet. No, he said, but you called. So I have some information to work with. I looked out the window at the rain. I thought about all the things I was good at. The patient kind of looking, the kind that didn't fill in the gaps before the evidence was there. The kind that stayed with uncertainty until uncertainty became something else. I thought about what Margot had said in the kitchen. I thought about the photograph which I'd had printed and pinned to the edge of my board at work, not as a threat but as a reminder. Someone is always looking. The question is what they see. Coffee, I said. There's a place on Canby. They open early. A pause, brief, considered. What time? 8, I said. And I'll have questions. I'd expect nothing else, he said. Outside, the rain came down steadily over the city, over the inlet, over everything that was still unresolved and still worth understanding. Biscuit blinked at me from across the table. I reached over and scratched behind her ears. She permitted this. She always did, not enthusiastically, but with the tolerance of an animal who had decided, a long time ago, that I was worth staying for. That felt, at 8 o'clock on a January morning, like enough to go on.